Lord, thank you for this day. We pray that you'll bless our time together, and pray you'll always help us to keep in mind that we have this great promise of your return to come and clean this mess up. And we just pray that you'll always help us to keep that in mind. Bless us today in Jesus' name, amen. Well, have a lot of things to talk about today, so I'm going to title this one, The Beginning of a New Era. And it's been a crazy, it seems like each week it's crazier and crazier. Here's some of the channels that we're on. And again, we're still trying to get the podcast thing rolled out, and just be patient with us on that. I know that will help some people with bandwidth and that type of thing. So you try Rumble, Real FBC. I think their bandwidth is a little bit lower than YouTube's. And then RTN TV also, they compress the videos pretty significantly there, and that helps also on the bandwidth. So we talk about these convergence of events, and that's just a slide I made up a long time ago about some of the events of history that were prophetic or referred to in the prophetic scriptures: Tower of Babel, the days of Noah, the days of Lot. You have Hebron, one of my favorite spots in Israel, the tomb of the patriarchs. Been there. It was there like that at the time of Jesus. Well, without the minarets on top, because Islam came along a lot later. And it's interesting when the Jewish writers look at the Bible, they see a pattern, and then that's a prophecy. So pattern is prophecy. So for example, with regard to Hebron, what was it that happened at Hebron? Well, the big dispute, at least there in the Middle East, is between the Jews and the Arabs, right? So who were the Jews the descendants of? Well, Abraham. But who were the Arabs the descendant of? Abraham. But the Jews went down came through Jacob, and then Esau, that was the father of the Arabs. And that dispute, and they, as you probably know from reading the scripture, Jacob and Esau didn't really get along. But it's interesting that what happened at Hebron, though, some of the rabbis say that's what's going to happen in the future. Because what happened was, Jacob and Esau had a split, but when Abraham died, they came to Hebron and they reconciled. And so while you see, and if you go to Hebron today, you will find there's a small group of Jews who live there, probably maybe 1,000. And then Hebron itself is probably the second largest city in Israel, Arab city in Israel, maybe the largest. But the city is incredibly divided. I mean, I'm talking like gates and turnstiles and fences and cages that you got to walk through to get from one part of Hebron to the other, closed streets. But it's interesting that in the midst of that incredibly divided city, I mean, it's unlike anything else I saw in Israel. I mean, no man's land there near the tomb of the patriarchs. But that is where the pattern of an eventual reconciliation is seen in the scriptures because of the reconciliation of Jacob and Esau. It's a very interesting thing. So things are happening very quickly. Again, I see this, I love the score. Someday I'll do a better one to show how everything in prophecy, it's all these different parts, but they're all harmonized eventually. But we don't necessarily know that to be the case. We know this, I use this scripture every week about at the end, the wise will understand. And we have these horsemen that ride out. And so there's, every time I mention this, I get in trouble. Somebody doesn't like what I say because they have it right. And that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion, and you're allowed to disagree with me and still be my friend. But it's interesting is, how do we know that these horsemen are riding? And when can we say, yeah, this horseman is riding? Now, some people say, well, it has to be within this last 7-year period of history. And I do not like the term tribulation period, because I think that term is incredibly confusing. And some week I'll explain why I think that's confusing. And so I call it the 70th week, or the final 7 years. But then when we get into that period, how do we know that that horseman has ridden or started riding? So, I mean, because look at some of the way it's written. So the first seal, the conqueror, and of course I don't have my white horse on there yet because I'm reworking that one. But the first seal, now I saw when the land opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. So when do we say, okay, this is the first horseman? Because it says he goes forth conquering and to conquer, which indicates a process. In other words, he doesn't ride out and conquer everything the next day. And there's no indication that he finishes the conquering before the second seal opens. And I think they're progressive, and I think they sort of increase in intensity all the way till the end of that last period of history. And when he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come and see." Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, and there was given to him a great sword. So when do we say, okay, now this is the second seal? Because people are being killed. Well, people are being killed all over the world right now in different wars and disputes. Like, there's this big war going on in Ethiopia. I mean, you don't even really hear about it, do you? I mean, it's a major civil war. Libya, which we talk about because it does play into some of the prophecies of Bible prophecy, they're starting a civil war right now. And it's part related to oil and gas, because Europe needs oil and gas, and Europe is looking south. And Gaddafi's son is leading one of the factions, I believe, and Turkey's involved, and Russia's involved to some extent. So when do we say, okay, now the second seal? And then I'll just skip to the fourth one. And when he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to them over 1/4 of the earth, to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. Now, some people interpret that to mean that 1/4 of humanity dies in this seal. Now, I don't think that's the right interpretation. I think he gets power over 1/4 of the earth. And then you can interpret that one of two ways. Is it 1/4 of humanity, or they are given power over 1/4 of the earth? Or is it 1/4 of the earth's surface? And 1/4 of the earth's surface, by the way, is land, about 25%. So does this mean that this person or they get power over all of the land? Or is it over the population? But then some say, well, 1/4 will die, and 1/4 will die before we get to the middle of this 70th week. So do the math on that. That's 2 billion people divided by, multiply 365 times 3.5, and then divide 2 billion by that number, because roughly 2 billion is 1/4. And you come up with a pretty astounding number of people that are to be killed per day, if that's the way the prophecy plays out. And so, but I don't think that's what the prophecy says, but we can argue about that. But when do you say, okay, now this is the 4th seal in action? Is it when 1% of the Earth's population has been, if that's your view, 1% of the Earth's population has been killed? Or do you wait till it's 10%? I mean, when do you make the pronouncement? Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't think it's as easy as everybody makes it out to be. And I do think that we'll be getting indications. And so I have very good friends who I respect tremendously who think the horsemen are right. I tend to think not. But I also think, and this, I'm pretty sure I'm right on this one, is that we need to be very careful making these pronouncements about this is that which was prophesied. We need to do that out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. I don't think it should be a one-off. And I think we saw a lot of that with this state-approved treatment. And by the way, YouTube's has now changed its rules on what you're allowed to talk about with regard to that. But until I review them, I probably won't be talking about it. But we had a lot of people announcing that this was the mark of the beast. Now, I don't think that that's correct. It might have some of those characteristics, but I just don't think that we're there yet, mainly because it's called the mark of the beast, and nobody has identified the beast. And I think that's sort of a critical component of proclaiming that this is the mark of the beast, that you have to identify who the beast is. So we'll see how this goes, but certainly we live in crazy times. So this is the governor of Pennsylvania. I went to high school in Pennsylvania. So I have ties to Pennsylvania, and he has now issued an executive order, which I don't even know if he has the power to do this. I'll have to ask one of my friends who's a Pennsylvania state legislator. And know, by the way, that they're Pennsylvania state legislators because of the dispute over what happened in the election. They're being served with subpoenas and having their phones confiscated by the FBI. This is just, and I'll talk about a little more about that in a minute. But so he's issued this executive order, and the executive order is to ban conversion therapy. But look how they define conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is a traumatic practice based on junk science that actively harms the people it supposedly seeks to treat, said Governor Wolf. This discriminatory practice is widely rejected by medical and scientific professionals and has been proven to lead to worse mental health outcomes for LGBTQIA+. You got them all in. I think you might actually be missing a few, though, based on the latest research. Youth subjected to it. This is about keeping our children safe from bullying and extreme practices that harm them. Now, think of the absolute stupidity and inanity of that statement. First of all, if you want to talk about junk science, the junk science is the stuff he cites about these suicide outcomes, because it's the studies that do that are complete scientific garbage. They're trash, but he cites them. And then he says the harmful practices, but look at how they do this. Conversion therapy has been overwhelmingly rejected. This is the whereas part. This is the reasons why we're doing this. He's doing this. Has been overwhelmingly rejected by the scientific, medical, and educational communities. Oh, wait a minute. I thought the educational communities were not really teaching this or doing this. Here's the governor of the state of Pennsylvania saying they are. See, I'm already worked up. Education communities and numerous professional organizations have denounced conversion therapy due to its lack of scientific validation. And what do they, but they limit conversion therapy. I'll see if it's in my. All agencies under the governor's jurisdiction are directed to pursue opportunities and coordinate with each other to protect Pennsylvanians, particularly children, youth, and vulnerable adults, from conversion therapy to the fullest extent of their authority. But what do they define as conversion therapy? Talking to someone, counseling someone to change your sexual orientation or to change your gender identity. That's what they limit conversion therapy to, where you actually go in and mutilate someone, cut off body parts or add body parts. That's not conversion therapy. It's insanity. It is absolute insanity. So when you read Romans chapter 1, and it says that God gives them over to a reprobate mind, poster child for reprobate mind right there. Now pray for salvation. And I see people say pray for those in power. We should pray for those in power. But I'm not so sure that it's not incorrect. Pray for their salvation and pray that they be removed from power. I think that's fine. Right? I mean, we can try to have good leaders. But here's a study from UCLA, conversion therapy and LGBT youth. And I think maybe this is where, conversion therapy, also known as sexual orientation or gender identity change efforts. You see how they limit it? They play in these little games with the language. It's just identity and this that you're not allowed to change. But, and this is where it gets insane, is so your orientation and identity is fixed at birth, but your physical characteristics can be changed. The whole thing is just completely insane. Here's Christopher Rufo talking about radical gender theory coming to the heartland. You got to follow him at City Journal and ChristopherRufo.com or whatever his website is. Talk about here's Springfield Public Schools in the middle of Missouri and engaging in enacting this radical gender identity, transgender program in the schools. And then people will stand up and say, well, we don't really do that. But you can go, and Christopher is great because he downloads all the documents and you can download them and look at them. Now, this is kind of an interesting letter to the editor. This is August 18th in the Washington Post. It's in the family section of the magazine, it's sort of like Dear Abby, seeking advice. So it's written, anyway, my teen says they're non-binary. How do we know it isn't a phase? Now listen to what this mother says. 5 months ago, my 16-year-old daughter approached my husband and me and informed me that she is non-binary. We're not sure what to do with it. We think it may just be a phase. She and all of her close friends, 7 total, are all identifying themselves using the monikers bisexual, non-binary, trans, polyamorous, and a whole host of other words that have sent all the parents to the dictionary. Now, she changed. Do you think there might be some social influence going on here? And what they're doing is they're finding these things in clusters, usually among young girls. This is what happened in the UK. They found these clusters. But it's natural. Everybody's born with it. Well, until they get around somebody who thinks of it and they all want to be accepted in their group. They have spent a lot of energy discussing how their favorite celebrities and influencers identify in an interview or on social media. I don't want to harm her by rejecting what she is identifying as, but I also want her to find an authentic expression of herself. And I feel as if this may not be it. 2 months ago, she began insisting that we refer to her by a new name, which I try my best to remember and call her. The name she was given at birth was a beautiful name, one she used to be proud of. Now she complains that I am dead naming her if I call her by her birth name. Dead naming, that's a new word. It's all one word, by the way, no hyphens. There's no attempt by the mental health professionals or school counselors to even entertain that maybe she is confused. Quite the contrary. The school counselor said schools are not allowed to question or challenge who or what the student identifies as for fear of a lawsuit. By the way, there is a lawsuit where parents are suing because the school went through and had the child actually surgery performed on the child, like top surgery, without the parents knowing. It's a suit in Texas or California. I hope they get bazillions of dollars. I'm serious. This is just, The school counselor said schools are not allowed to question or challenge who or what the student identifies as for fear of a lawsuit. Even the clergy person, I asked to speak to my daughter, only wanted to help her develop something they term as a, quote, lesbian identity, unquote. Every professional has admonished and chastised my husband and myself not to even question my daughter's decisions as to what she is, but to simply accept whatever she offers to us, even though she has insisted she was 4 different things over the past few months. I am so sad. I want her to become whoever she is destined to be, and I would be happy with that. Is it possible for a teen to identify as something different every month? How much influence do a teen's friends have on each other to identify? How do we find a therapist, counselor, or pastor who can gently ask questions while respecting that perhaps a 16-year-old doesn't know everything? You see what's happening? It's a wedge to drive a wedge between parents and children. And this is tied in to the whole transhumanism thing, this concept they have. They want to augment and improve humanity, sometimes by implants and that sort of thing. And some dream that they'll change DNA and that type of thing, and they'll change humanity. And now we get into Yuval Noah Harari, Great Reset. But this transhumanism, this is really at the core of the transhumanism thing. I'll just read 2 paragraphs of a response. Thank you for writing. Many parents struggle with their children's identity and sexual changes, and you are not alone. Our culture has made it a huge shift toward openness and acceptance in this domain. In other words, you see what they're saying? You see the lie here? It's always been like this. We're just more open and informed and enlightened now than we were before. We're on this great progression where we're bringing in this great age of enlightenment. But that doesn't mean it's as easy for parents to get it the way our teens do. Remember, any human who didn't fit the cultural norm, heterosexual, has spent their lives either in the form of hiding or living out loud while endangering their emotional, physical, and economic safety. I would suggest to you that some people control their heterosexual desires to fit in. That's sort of a godly way to act. It's the way God designed it. While cultural and families grappling with this enormous shift, I want to be clear around the dangers of denying, sharing, or trying to change your daughter when it comes to sexual and gender identity. From the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Why are they weighing in on this? Well, they just did, the last couple of years, they've done such a phenomenal job. This is a quote, LGBT youth are at greater risk for depression, suicide, substance use, and sexual behaviors that can place them all at increased risk for HIV and other sexual transmitted diseases. Nearly 1/3 of LGBT youth had attempted suicide at least once in the prior year, compared to 6% of heterosexual youth. By loving and fully accepting my child, I am helping them to love and fully accept themselves. That's your attitude should be. This is just troubling. Now, I want to give credit and kudos. This is a genetic or molecular biologist at a debate of all places, University of California, Berkeley, where they were talking about this. And I think this is in California and at Berkeley, this is a very brave woman, and she should get plaudits for what she said. So listen to what she said at this debate. She was asked some questions about this.
Trans women should be legally treated as women. Tell me why you're strongly disagreeing.
Because I'm a molecular geneticist. being male or being female is a developmental process. You can't go backwards. Okay. So you can't change your sex. Like, you cannot do that. And the truth is that currently in California prisons and prisons in other parts of the country, women are getting impregnated by other women. And there's just no way that, I mean, this is against the UN. After World War II, there was like I don't remember what body came up with this statute, but it was against, I believe it was The Hague. You cannot house female prisoners with male prisoners because they get raped. And that's happening today. You know, I go to the women's changing room at my gym, and there's a dude in there, he's putting on makeup and hoop earrings. And this is not something a woman does when she goes to work out. Nor do women beat each other to death, but men do. You know, and it's so sad that women have internalized misogyny to the point where the man's comfort takes precedence over the woman's safety. There's a reason why they don't want to be in men's prisons, because men beat each other to death. Women don't do that.
What, if anything, would cause you to move to the disagree? And is there anything you heard here tonight that would convince you to move one line over? It's okay to say no, I'm just trying to figure this out.
No, I have figured it out.
And you're confident?
I am as confident as I am that this is my hand in front of my face instead of yours. There is absolutely, this is the most insane thing that has ever happened to me in my life, that women are feeling now.
Hey, pray for her, you know. That took courage. At Berkeley, go, madam, go. But you even see how she was, like I do sometimes. I don't know the words to really say to express my feeling about this. I saw an interview with a lady the other night. She's 80 years old, and she lives in the Olympia Peninsula of Washington, and she went to the YMCA. Have you heard about the story? And there was a guy in there, a trans guy, claimed to be a woman, watching little girls undress and get dressed. She went and objected. She said, this is not right. You know what she was told by the YMCA? You are banned from ever coming here again for life. Because they're enlightened. They figured it all out. And she's right. Look, I worked in a prison, and guys in prison beat other guys in prison. It happens. Now, I think it happens in women's prisons too, but there's a statistical thing there. But now they're putting men in women's prison because they identify as a woman. And guess what they're now finding in the research? I have a master's degree in criminology, so I understand a little bit about the research. They're finding out that when the men leave prison, they go back to being men. It's a scam. If this is not indicative that the world has fully gone to a reprobate mind, I cannot think of a better example. I could give you 100 of these every week. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, whether you like her or not, she's a conservative congressman from Georgia. She's introduced a bill in Congress to stop this at the federal level. So here's an interview she did on Tucker Carlson the other night about what has happened to her. This is terrible.
Just after midnight this Wednesday morning, several police officers arrived, guns drawn, at the home of Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia. Now, they arrived because someone had called the police and said falsely that a man had been shot several times in a bathtub in Marjorie Taylor Greene's house. Then again, on Thursday morning, just before 3 a.m., police received another report about, quote, a male possibly shooting his family members and then himself at Marjorie Greene's house. Now, the point of all of this, of course, these lies, was to get the police to show up and shoot Marjorie Taylor Greene. So this is an attempt to kill a sitting member of Congress for political reasons. Everyone else seems to be ignoring the story. We think it's a story. Marjorie Taylor Greene, as we said, is a member of Congress from the state of Georgia. She joins us tonight. Congresswoman, thanks so much for coming on. Who did this? Do we have any idea?
We don't know, but it's under investigation, and there's multiple layers of federal law enforcement working with our local Rome police. Tucker, I have to tell you, I am so grateful for our local police because they handled this in such a professional way. But we already know what can happen in Washington, especially at the federal level, where we're seeing the Department of Justice and the FBI there being used as political weaponry against political enemies. And whoever is doing this to me seems to be a direct result of the legislation that I introduced last week, the Protect Children's Innocence Act, because they called in and confessed to the 911 call center saying that they were a trans kids activist, and they are angry at me for trying to stop these awful surgeries, hysterectomies, double mastectomies, castration of children. And, you know, this should not be happening, but they're so angry at me for trying to protect kids that they're willing to have me killed, and definitely working hard to do that.
So here is someone who is attempting to murder a sitting member of Congress, a federal official, as you are, for political reasons. If there's a reason we have a Justice Department, it's to respond to things like that. Tell us, has the Justice Department jumped on this with all four paws to find out who did it?
They are working on investigating it. The person that did this used some sort of computer system. So they didn't call directly from their phone. They called in using some sort of system like a text-to-speech type of program, where they called in and you can't hear their voice. We don't know what their phone number is,
right,
but it's all under investigation, and they need to find this person because you know they won't stop. This is politics today. It's now political war. But I have to tell you, Tucker, I am actually really angry at what they've done. I'm more resolved than ever, and I'm not going to back down.
I believe you there. A rhetorical question. What's it like to be woken up at 3 in the morning with police officers at the door, guns drawn?
It's terrifying. It's terrifying. Sound asleep. You hear a doorbell, knock at the door, seeing flashlights, open the front door to guns drawn. And you're shocked, you don't know what's happening, and then the police are having the same situation. They don't know if they're responding to a horrible incident where someone has been killed or possibly could be killed, but they're there to do their job, and they quickly figured out that I was swatted, and it's happened twice now. If
you'd thought it was a home invasion and showed up with a gun, you would have been shot to death. So, and that, of course,
absolutely
is the point of it. Really a shocking story, ignored. Congresswoman, I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you very much.
Here's another interview
Tucker.
that she gave on the same subject.
Can you believe, Brian, that someone wants to kill me because I want to protect kids from a surgery that permanently changes them for the rest of their lives? Hysterectomies where they can't have children, castration where they can't have children, double mastectomies that scar them for life, hormone therapies that will change a young teenage girl's voice to sound like a man, and it can never change back. Puberty blockers for 11-year-old little boys that is like chemical castration, the same drugs they will give to sex offenders, chemical castration that will hurt them for the rest of their life, hurts their bone density, has all kinds of side effects. Someone wanted to have me killed, wanted to have the police murder me because I'm trying to protect kids.
And she said that she got up, she usually keeps a AR-15 or AK-47 by the bed. She usually picks that up. But at the last second, she thought, I'm not going to take my gun with me to the front door. This is America in 2022, my friends. So I was reading through different
Can you believe?
I was reading through some of the Twitter feeds. Do you know what they're doing to her? There was remember on January 6th, there was a bomb planted outside the Democratic National Headquarters. And they have video of the person walking to the headquarters. It was released. A lot of video that hasn't been released, by the way. A lot of video. Just release it. We'll figure it out. We're smart people. Oh, no. That wouldn't fit what? The narrative, right? But do you know that somebody released security footage from the same camera showing her walking by the same area one day? And now everybody, all these lefties on Twitter are saying she must be involved in that planning of that bomb. I'm telling you, folks, you have to understand, this is not the America that you knew a year ago. It's not. Certainly not 3 years ago. So, and this is indicative. Look, there's political disruption everywhere. Here's Liz Truss. Looks like she might be elected prime minister of the UK, but now there's word that Boris Johnson might come back today. He's still available. So you have that. You have it. Brazil is in the midst of a political campaign season. We're in it, and this is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Biden came out. He has no constitutional authority to do this. You will not hear that on CNN. You will not hear that on MSNBC. But there are old tapes of Nancy Pelosi saying out there the president can't issue an order to forgive student debt or forgive debt. Where's she at now? I saw her husband didn't get jail time for his drunk driving thing. I was surprised he didn't ask for it, just to get away for a while. But this cost of this will be somewhere between $300 billion and $1 trillion. And what's the message that it sends? Go out and take out all these big loans. Go to Harvard. Get your gender studies degree. And let the guy that's working at the Amazon warehouse, he'll pay for it. We'll transfer the debt to the public, so he's part of the public, so he gets to pay for it. This money changed colleges. I mean, that's why you have adjunct professors to teach who make nothing, and you have administrators who make a couple $100,000 a year to administrate something. That's the way a lot of these universities work now. So I will repeat what I think I've said before, that you really need to get your kids, if at all possible, out of public schools. Homeschool them, work with friends, whatever. They'll be better off. They'll be socialized. I've known so many homeschool kids in my life, and they're probably at least as engaging as the best engaging of public school kids. They know how to talk to adults, and they're kind of refreshing. And look, public schools 20 years ago, public schools are not what they were 20 years ago. That's just a given. And I'm also thinking that maybe homeschooling ought to be extended to college. There's a few that you could probably go to. So let me talk about this. I could go on for this because this raid on Mar-a-Lago. But this sort of shows the lawlessness that we're at. Now listen, Mike Davis at the Article 3 Project, I've been listening to him talk and write about this, reading what he's written about this. He essentially says, look, by definition, the president or a former president who has a permanent security clearance cannot violate the Presidential Records Act on secret or top secret documents. It just can't happen. Alan Dershowitz, he was talking, he says, well, the problem wasn't the warrant or the judge, the problem wasn't the judge. Any judge probably would have granted the warrant, but it was Merrick Garland who sat on this thing for weeks, and then even when they got the warrant, they waited a few days to execute it. And he said, I don't think Trump will be indicted because they didn't indict Clinton, they didn't indict Nixon. But I'm telling you, Jack Posobiec on War Room the other day called this a pre-coup situation. This is to interfere in the election. This is what banana republics do. This is what third world countries do. It's unbelievable. Of course, the Financial Times, they said, it's just perpetual chaos. So here's our, so the president went to Rockville, Maryland on Thursday and gave a speech. Somebody's running for Congress. And in that talk he gave, now I'm a pretty good researcher. I can usually find something. All I can find are people quoting the president. I cannot find video of the president saying this. And I looked at a couple dozen. It's interesting, usually on YouTube now, like if you want to see what I'm saying, you think my words are worth reading, you can go to the right of the YouTube video. There's 3 dots. You click on that, and there'll be 2 little things will pop up. One will be report. You don't want to click on that, okay? Because there's nothing wrong with what we're saying here. But there's a transcript, and you can go through, and it's time-stamped and everything, and you can do a search, Control F, and search for certain words in the transcript. I noticed one thing, the full videos of Obama speaking, and not Obama, Biden speaking, had no transcript. And they didn't have the words that everybody quoted him. And there were graphics on MSNBC and CNBC and CNN and PBS about what he said, but no clip. The clip of him saying it is gone. It's down the memory hole, like a lot of other things at the White House. And what he said was, I don't have any respect for these MAGA. They're semi-fascist. Now, I don't know what a half-fascist is. Is that half-fascist, or is that a big semi-truck fascist, or what? So they asked his press secretary, what do you mean by that?
On the semi-fascism comment,
Yeah.
Is this something we're going to hear more of, that phrase? Is it something the president's going to kind of embrace? Or is there any sense that it was a little impromptu, and it's going to turn into a kind of basket of deplorables thing that he regrets and tries to be quiet about?
Look, I was very clear when laying out and defining what MAGA Republicans have done, and you look at the definition of fascism, and you think about what they're doing in attacking our democracy, what they're doing in taking away our freedoms, wanting to take away our rights, our voting rights. I mean, that is what that is. It is very clear, and that's why he made that powerful speech that you heard from him last night. And he has not shied away from saying that.
Sigh. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. They will always accuse you of what they're doing. By the way, she said they want to take away your rights. They want to vote this. Who controls the White House? Who controls Congress? It's not the Republicans. It's the Unitary Party, the Uniparty, because there's plenty of Republicans that do stupid stuff too. But unbelievable. Here's a graph on some of the things, the toll of skyrocketing U.S. student debt. So we'll just wave a wand and it'll go away. And this editorial on the right, student debt relief plan reveals the limits of Biden's imperfect tools. And that's the New York Times the other day. And this would be related. It's frightening when police give up on crime. I don't know if you've seen the video. Guy comes up and he just absolutely punches somebody, knocks him down, charged with attempted murder, out on bail, and then the charge is reduced to a misdemeanor. There was a lady in a carjacking the other day. I forget what city this was in. They grabbed her arm to get her out of the car. They ripped her arm off, and she bled to death in a carjacking. This is a true story. I'm not trying to frighten anybody. You need to be situationally aware everywhere you go. You need to be watching. Because this is not the same world that we all grew up in. And when I say that we grew up in, I'm talking to like 10-year-olds when I say that. So I want to do this. So maybe I'll set this up a different way. So here's China. And China is in the midst of a severe drought, particularly in the Yangtze River Valley. And here you see a major river in a major city in China, and guess what? People are walking across it for exercise on the rocks. Something is going on. I mean, there's a drought in the UK, in France, in Italy, in the desert Southwest, and now China. And here's a little thing from the South China Morning Post, which is really published in Hong Kong, so they kind of get away with a little bit of being anti-China. But look at this video. This lady's in a lake, the largest freshwater lake in China, fishing. The water used to flood over the embankment, but now there is no more. This is the largest lake in China. She travels 4 miles every morning and afternoon to reach the lake. Makes it easier for fishing, though, I bet, because there's less water. So, but what's happening as a result of this with China? They're shutting down factories and everything because it's affecting their hydroelectric power. The Three Gorges Dam, which is the largest hydroelectric dam on planet Earth, it actually, the weight of the water there, when it's full, is enough to sort of affect the rotation of the Earth a bit. And you remember it was about, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, they had so much rain in China that everybody thought it was going to collapse from the water pressure. Now they're not storing water there. It's just sort of a pass-through, and it affects the hydroelectric generation. This is the largest hydroelectric dam on the planet. I'm just telling you, I don't know. Okay, some people think it's intentionally caused. Maybe God's doing it. We have to consider that possibility. God does intervene, but they're shutting down factories. I'm going to show you something. I think this is one of the next couple segments are kind of scary. So if you want to get up and go, outside and beat your head against a brick wall for a while and come back in, and then we'll finish up with war in the Middle East or something. So this is Shanghai. This is marinetraffic.com. You can go and look at it, and you can set up on the left. There's little things you can click on, and you can set your filter. So this is set for tankers, oil, gas tankers. And China imports all of its oil because it doesn't really have any gas in oil or gas. So there's a lot of tankers. And you can zoom in and you can see the river there and the ports and everything along the river. Now, this is container ships. China's still a major manufacturing part of the world economy. We shifted everything to China. And they've taken over a lot. They have these institutes at the Confucius Institutes at a lot of colleges and universities here in the United States, and I'm sure a lot of those are spies. Because China is like, I don't know, I shouldn't say it if it's racist, but they just sort of, every time I look at China and what they do, I sort of have this, I remember that movie Independence Day, you know, where the alien spacecraft are going and just sort of sucking up all the resources and stuff everywhere, and planets throughout the universe. And I'm sorry, that's just, it's a fact. And they have this Middle Kingdom view, and they think they're going to rule the world. Now, Xi's, by the way, you talk about political turmoil, Xi's up for re-election as the head of the Chinese Communist Party. And it's not a dead certain thing. There's a lot of turmoil in China right now. Their economy is crashing. Their real estate is crashing. Their bank system is crashing. And that may be why they haven't invaded Taiwan yet. Now, they have a lot of military power. They got a lot of missiles and all this other stuff. But I'm just telling you is there are a lot of crazy forces at work in the world today. One of which, so here's tankers. So you have tankers, you have container ships, and here's a combined view, tankers and container ships. But then there's a new, I have not noticed it before, but it's a category called unspecified. So you can get fishing vessels. I mean, if you click on this, there'd be orange dots all over the place for fishing vessels. Because China eats a lot of fish. They go out into the ocean, especially when their largest freshwater lake looks like the pond in my subdivision. One of the ponds in my subdivision. So here's another one, unspecified. And as best as I can determine, these are ships that, like container ships, that have been taken out of service. And they are in gray. Here you go. They turned off the if you click on any one of those dots, it'll tell you the ship, destination, and everything. You click on those gray dots, and it just says ship moored here. And I'm pretty sure because China shut down with COVID, lockdowns, and that type of thing, they shut their plants. Those ships have nothing to pick up. So they've been taken out of service. Sort of like have you ever been out to Arizona, the Phoenix area on the west side? There's a big airfield there south of Interstate 10. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of aircraft. You know, passenger planes and that type of thing sitting there. That's where they're stored because it's the desert, it's dry, they put stuff over the engines. And then in the event that they want to put them back in service, it's not as expensive as if they try to store it in Columbus because they have to do a lot of things to it. It's a crazy sight. It's like the junkyard of airplanes. And there's got to be thousands of them. It's unbelievable. It's acres and acres and acres and acres. Look at it on Google Earth. I-10 west of Phoenix near Buckeye, Arizona, south of I-10. But these ships have had their transponders turned off. But they know where they stopped. So here's a picture of just the ships, the gray ones. Do you think we're at the end of the supply chain issue or the beginning? We're sort of in the middle. Here's one zoomed out so you can see Japan, Okinawa, and if you went up just a little bit more, you could see the Korean Peninsula. But look at all these dots down here. Look at them. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these ships just sitting there. Okay, so enough for the upbeat part of today's update. Head of the Federal Reserve went out to Jackson Hole. Beautiful area. You see the Tetons in the background there. We were there last summer or last fall. And he said, well, we're probably going to have to still raise interest rates. And you can see what the stock markets did. Boom. Then on the right, you see this gas prices at record high in Europe. Now, part of what's going on in China is encapsulated in a tweet by a very intelligent guy. He's a very unique individual, the richest man on the earth right now, Elon Musk, and he tweeted this the other day. Population collapse due to low birth rates is a much bigger risk to civilization than global warming. Mark these words. He's correct. Part of what you see going on in the United States is not enough people. And as I said, China has not enough people. Now, how can you say that? They have like 1.23 billion because their population is declining, they're aging. And I'm telling you, this has never happened in human history. I'm pretty confident of saying that. I spoke at a conference up in Lima, Ohio 3 years ago where a large part of my talk was about demographics, because I think this is part of what is all converging. So the biggest collapse in fertility rate in human history, by their own words and admission, by the mullahs of Iran, has been that Iran has had the fastest decline in fertility rate of any country in human history. So what does that tell you? China's collapsing. Russia is too, without the Muslim population increasing. Ethnic Russians are in demographic collapse. That's why a lot of people say Russia wouldn't have done this in 5 years, go into Ukraine. They had to do it now. China released some of its census, and what they did was, well, we kind of overcounted by 100 million people. Oh, guess what? They were almost all women. Their birth rate will not recover. Now, I think that this might be an indication of the time in which we live, because it's one of these convergence factors and things are happening more quickly and they're all converging. And so that means, I think, certain countries are more likely to do something before they really run out of people, like Iran and Russia and others. Turkey seems to be doing okay, by the way, on demographics. So this is part of this ESG stuff, repowering the West. So we're just gonna put windmills everywhere. That's Wyoming. We're gonna build windmills in Wyoming and ship all the power to California. And here's what California's doing. They have a new rule or something. We are going to be rid of gas cars by 2035. Assuming the wind in Wyoming and a whole bunch of other places blows all the time. This is insanity. Putin's flaring off $10 million worth of gas a day so it doesn't go to Germany. You're going to see some of this surging UK prices. Here is Germany front year wholesale baseload electricity price, and you want to look at just the last couple of months. And I have another chart here. Here's a UK wholesale electricity price cost. It's like 600 pounds per megawatt. In the United States, so The pound's worth about $1.3, so it's kind of hard to convert, but I'll just use it like it's dollars. So last year, megawatt cost in the UK were, well, you can see what they were. They're now 600. In the United States, we pay about $70, $80 per megawatt hour. Europe was paying about 3 times that. Now the cost has gone up, and so this is energy crisis are going to destroy. They're shutting down factories in Germany and the UK and other places, which means people don't have jobs to pay the higher utility bills, and which affects supply chains. So they're shutting down smelters and foundries and that sort of thing. Look, I don't want to. I suppose this could turn around. I'm not expecting it to. I don't know what to say. I'm just telling you that we are seeing the collapse of the world economy in real time. Now, it's kind of hard to do that, in Columbus, Ohio, where the economy is pretty good, but I'm just saying, look at The Guardian the other. So open space is even wider in London's empty offices. There's going to be foreclosures all over the place once those things cut loose. And it's going to happen in the United States. Year-over-year demand for office space, commercial office space in the United States, down 30%. In parts of London, 50% down. All those buildings, they're financed. They're not paid for. They're financed by banks. This is epic. But now with the increase in energy costs, see Germany slipping into recession, formerly the strongest economy in the European Union. Here's the headlines of the Guardian the other day. Lives will be lost. Incomes of poor households could be wiped out this winter. There's a guy named Martin Lewis, and he's been doing some interviews. He's sort of the consumer guy in the UK. And this was from the Financial Times a couple of weeks ago. I've referred to this before. And he's just saying I'm not going to say that an emergency is coming. The emergency is here. And people will die this winter due to high energy cap prices. That, in other words, it's out of control. So this is the Financial Times. People are going to die. Verdict from the front line of Britain's energy crisis. And so here's a big article on the Daily Mail. You can look it up. Emotional Martin Lewis warns that the big squeeze could be fatal for people who can't afford to heat their homes this winter. Now listen, I'm telling you that you go and read papers and you look it up, and you're going to see a whole bunch of people saying, well, here's one article. I think we're facing a serious crisis, also in the Daily Mail from about a month ago, earlier 3 weeks ago. I don't doubt we're facing a serious crisis, but did the BBC and its favorite prophet of doom, Martin Lewis, have to be so apocalyptic? Mr. Stephen Glover, the answer is yes. This is a crisis of epic proportions. I'm going to play you 2 videos. They're going to take about 15 minutes, but I think these are smart people. First will be Martin Lewis talking about what's going on. I want you to listen to what he says and ask you, is this some crazy guy that doesn't know what he's talking about? And the BBC's been doing these articles, people, businesses, mothers. I have to decide whether I'm going to pay my utility bill or feed my kid. This is going on right now in the UK. Listen, if you're not going through that, thank the Lord. But I'm just telling you there are a lot of people, and this is not all Putin, by the way. This is the ESG. They've shut down production. They've taken nuclear energy offline. They've decommissioned coal plants. Germany is continuing to decommission nuclear reactors and coal plants right now. They're out of their minds. Okay, so here's Martin Lewis on Good Morning Britain.
Millions of households will see a record 80% rise in their energy bills
80%.
from October. We now know that. Ofgem, the energy regulator, have announced that the energy price cap is to increase from the current £1,971 to £3,549.
Yeah. People getting in touch are rightly worried this morning. So to get some insight, we are now joined by Good Morning Britain's Martin Lewis. Martin, as ever, thanks for joining us. Now, no one should be surprised by this. You've told us this is coming. We've all known this is coming, but it doesn't make it any easier, does it? It's just to see it and see now that it's an absolute fact makes it really catastrophic for so many people.
Well, I've been accused of catastrophizing this situation, and the reason I've done that is because this is a genuine social and financial catastrophe that is putting lives at risk. And we have to hope it should have been done far earlier. I first actually said that we'd see an October price cap over £3,000 on my show back in March. So while this is shocking, it is far from surprising. And we need urgent further government intervention. If you'll forgive me, I noticed in your readout, and I'm noticing many media organisations saying that the price cap is £3,549 a year. That isn't correct. If I just take a second to explain what's happening. The price cap is actually a cap on the standing charges and unit rates that you pay. They have gone up by around 80%. I've put on Twitter what the actual new rates are, although it is regionally averaged. The figure that's quoted, the £3,549, is what the cap would be for someone who has typical usage. Of course, most people don't have typical usage, they're more or less. And that means there is no maximum amount that you can pay for gas and electricity.
Just to reassure you, Martin, we have been saying that this morning here on this programme. But it is important to say, because people might be just joining us, you know, that they could well be paying very much more. And also to give us the detail of who that cap applies to, because it's not clear either, is it?
It isn't, no. So you could easily be paying £5,000 or £10,000 a year if you have high usage. I worry terribly for some of those who have disabled children or disabilities themselves who need lots of electrical equipment to keep their houses warm because of medical conditions. There is also a price cap for prepayment. There's also a price cap for those who are payment in receipt of bills. Those caps are higher. Payment in receipt of bills is a couple of £100 a year higher on typical use than direct debit. So we've seen that happen now. And I'm afraid to say it doesn't end there. The regulator, and I objected to this in consultation, but the regulator decided that the cap would move every 3 months, not every 6 months, and that is going to cost people money. The prediction now in January, I don't really want to say it, but the prediction now in January is up another 51% on top of where we are now. And that would take a typical bill on direct debit to £5,386 a year. And that is not such a crystal ball prediction because we are 7 months through the 10-month assessment period for the January price cap. Some have also talked about what will happen the following April. Well, that is much more difficult to predict as the assessment period for that hasn't started. So if we look at the totality across the winter from October until March, you are probably talking on typical use an average bill of over £4,400 a year, typical pro rata. I mean, it is totally unaffordable. The help that we were promised back in May, that is coming through by the government, and I spoke to the former Chancellor days beforehand, and 80 to 90% of what I suggested was in the plans. That was based on a prediction for the winter of 2,800. Well, we're already at 3,550, and then in January, because then it was a 6-month cap, now it's a 3-month cap, it's going to be, on current predictions, £5,400. As you can see, that means the help that is being given so far is a drop in the ocean.
So you can go look at that. He was also on the BBC. Make sure you have your Xanax handy to listen to the full interview. And so here, reminder style scare stories risk talking us into a recession, blast furious bosses. So there are people come out and say, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. We're putting things in storage. They're talking about blackouts. So here's Germany and France. This will, you see where their energy prices are? So we're talking about $70, $80 a megawatt. maybe they were at 200. France is hitting 1,000 euros per megawatt. Germany is approaching 1,200. It's up like 10 times. So, by the way, everybody who's appeared on in the show today is getting special guest prophecy update status, you know, except that person who does the White House press briefings. This is frightening. So this is a chart that shows where electricity for Europe was generated in 2021, nuclear, gas, coal, wind, hydro, solar. Look at wind and solar. It's not even 20%. They're going to make it all, and it doesn't work all the time. Remember Texas? Oil-rich Texas had an energy crisis a year ago. It was unbelievable. And they're trying to shrink that. It's a scam. Here's Emmanuel Macron. He's talking. Look at what he says.
What we are living through is a time of great upheaval. Firstly, because we are witnessing, and not just since this summer, but over the past few years, the end of what we might have seen as abundance. And for those who enjoyed it, it is also the end of a carefree time. Our freedom, the liberty to which we have grown accustomed to in our lives, has a price, and sometimes when we have to defend it, we have to make certain sacrifices as we fight to defend it.
And so this is kind of Emmanuel Macron. By the way, after he did this, he was filmed down at one of the President of France has access to a palace home, big home down. It's either on the lake or down in the south of France, and he was out jet skiing. So here he sits. The era of abundance is over, as he says, sitting in his gold-edged office or whatever. It's sort of his Marie Antoinette moment. You guys, the era of abundance is over as I sit here in this gold-edged palace. Here's Germany. They're trying to store gas. The black line is what they've stored so far. And the question is, are they going to get to the blue line, you know, which was the average in 2011 to 90% of their storage full, when Russia's shutting off the gas? But if Russia's shutting off the gas, what do they do? So here's Dave Walsh. You can follow him on Getter. This is about 7-8 minutes. I just think you need to listen to him. He's a really smart guy. He's built energy plants all over the world. He was on War Room yesterday, and they started talking about the France, and you'll see the chart there for France and the increase in costs. And Dave will explain some of what's going on.
Look at that chart. Explain that chart to me about what France is looking at, Dave Walsh.
This is forward wholesale electricity prices reaching now $1,000 per kilowatt hour. Typically over here, they're in last 6 months in the range of 70 to 80, just to give you an example, in North America. Only 10 days ago, in Western Europe, they were about 550, which was, again, you know, nearly 8 times the U.S., 7 times the U.S. level. But now, over the past 10 days, have skyrocketed and blipped to $1,000 forward electricity wholesale prices, which eventually translate right into retail prices and industrial prices, which is deadly. And this is where you get rates that people can't afford, and government stepping in, as it's done in France, to put caps on rates, bankrupting EDF, where the French government now takes over EDF. And in the UK, this horrendous situation, they're already subsidizing about $240 a month for excessive power bills. It went up 54% in the spring, and now projected to go up another 80% next month. In the UK, they're talking about doubling the subsidies that folks are provided from the government. But, you know, long run, that's not a solution to the issue. And if I have 2 minutes, I'll just talk about where Europe had been. Where Europe had been as recently as 2006. I was building big plants over in Salt End and Dam Head in the UK, conventional, 100% of the time, baseload energy, combined cycle plants. A big one in Ireland, 7 in Spain. Europe generally, Western Europe had about 25%, accounting for France on the high end, Germany on the high end, average. 25% nuclear, about 40% coal, about 20% gas-fired power base. for electricity, and maybe about 9% hydro. Renewables, maybe 3-4% back in 2006. What you have with that, you've got 26% built-in reserve margin to begin with in a conventional system like that, traditional system, and you have the ability to overfire coal plants and overfire gas plants by about 10% when you run into other problems with excessive demand or inability to meet demand. So you got 10% buffer in the coal and nuclear assets, and then you've got 26% reserve margin generally built into that whole system of a conventional, typical, traditional energy system that's dependable, reliable, and accessible to humans on a cost basis. Well, that's all flipped now. The Germans have shut down 80% of their nuclear plants. The last 3, they still haven't decided to keep open. The last 3 were going to be closed at the end of this year. Unbelievably, have not made the permanent decision to keep them open, which is an issue. England has announced the cessation of all of its coal plants by 2030. So you've got these countries basically have absorbed renewables between 22% on the low end, the UK, and 37%, Germany, on the high end, displacing all that baseload energy capacity. And to give you an idea of how, mathematically useless solar.
Stop. Hang on, stop. That's a fantasy. Just walk through the math.
Yeah.
That's impossible. It can't work. It's a fantasy. They've made these decisions. Okay.
Yeah, Steve,
is the math correct?
Yes. No, it's totally correct. For example, in 2006, England was 68% self-sufficient on natural gas production in country and from the North Sea. 68% self-sufficient. Today, they're 28% self-sufficient, and now 40% dependent up to now on Russian gas.
Let me go back to that headline. By the way, LNG here, this price of natural gas here is going to go $13 or $15 because when the plants come back up, they're going to take all the output we can give them. When that mother and all the mothers in France that are going to be choosing between the kids freezing under 9 layers of clothing are feeding them, when those moms understand that this was decisions that these corrupt, incompetent political leaders made decisions. Real quickly, Dave, give me the rise in British energy is going to go, what, 4 times by next spring? Give me those quick hits right now. How many times is it going to go up by next spring?
Average household now about 3,500 pounds per year. There are projections of 5,500 pounds per year by next spring. And, we're talking currency, it's about 1.3 times the U.S. per household.
Hang on. That is the end. Write this down now. That is the end of the Tory party. The end of the Tory party, because they're going to get blamed for it, and they should get blamed for it. They've been in power. You got Boris Johnson wandering around over there, Ukraine, trying to be Winston Churchill, which he ain't. Dave Walsh. Is anything I'm saying not absolutely ironclad true, sir?
No, it's on the mark. By the way, that the Breitbart story, it's a reaffirmation of the chart we looked at. Because a year ago, European wholesale forward prices were about $100. Now they're 1,000. I think that's 1,000% at Saturday morning. But it's the same bad news. But here, so we're not worried about BlackRock. I want to make sure we're not losing sleep over.
Okay, so BlackRock's making money because they're invested in energy. And look, the article from UK Times today, and they're saying next summer, things don't change, it could go to 8,800, 9,000 on the household cap. From 3,500, it just zoomed up to 3,000, 80% increase to 3,500. It could more than double. I'm just telling you that this is, one of the big theories. Well, listen, this is what's going on. This is the next phase of the Great Reset coming to fruition. Now, a lot of us have been talking about ESG and the impact that it's going to have. This is what it's having. The Greens, largely funded by Russia and Saudi Arabia. Oh. So that's what's going on. I mentioned this in my midweek update, and I'll do a midweek update, mostly focus on the Middle East this week. But, this Alexander Dugin, who we've been talking around here for 8 or 9 years, and the influence he has on Putin, often referred to as Putin's brain or Putin's Rasputin. He and his daughter were leaving a conference. They were supposed to go together. She took his car and it exploded, and you can see from the video there's a screen capture, and you see him there holding his head as his daughter's just been blown to smithereens. She received a hero's funeral in Russia, and now there's all this speculation. Was it Ukraine? Was it the CIA? Was it this agency or that agency? And some have even suggested that Dugin had sort of worn out his welcome with the Russian regime. And so this would be a good time to get rid of him, and you create a martyr at the same time, because you can blame it on somebody else. And they've already blamed Ukraine, so who knows what's going on. So I'm going to just do two or three quick things. This continues to be an issue. The gas fields off the coast of Israel and the demarcation boundary line dispute between Israel and Lebanon, and Hezbollah is stepping in. This is the Hezbollah view of what Israel is doing. They are taking Hezbollah and Lebanon's gas like an octopus. So there's been drones flying. There's a lot of things. Amos Hochstein was in Israel, Lebanon. He's supposed to go back, I think, this week or next. And we don't know. I mean, this is what Hezbollah said. Israel cannot extract gas from any platform in the occupied Palestinian Sea, and not only from the Karish platform. So Hezbollah is saying, you shut it down, or we're coming after you, And they have, this is from Al Akbar, their newspaper. And it's kind of interesting. On the upper left-hand corner, there's a picture. And it looks like a mess of wires. That's Lebanon today. Lebanon is in a power crisis. They have 3 or 4 hours of power a day. And what they do is they're stealing it. And Dave Walsh talked about that in the part of the clip I didn't play. He said, when countries in South and Central America build these power stations and that type of thing, they build in 15% extra capacity because they figure that people are going to steal or not pay, mostly steal the power. How did they steal the power? They tie copper wires onto sneakers and throw them over the power lines and hook them up to their house. It sounds like a safe thing to do, but that's what they do. And Dave Walsh thinks that that's coming to America because of this cost, because of what ESG is doing. So Hezbollah, another speech by Nasrallah that he's going to stand firm on the border. Now, this I just want to, I'll talk more about this in my midweek update, Tuesday or Wednesday, probably Wednesday. This is the front page a couple days ago of Al Akbar newspaper. This is a Arab language newspaper published in Lebanon, and it's sort of the official mouthpiece for Hezbollah. Hezbollah effectively controls the government. They don't really have much of a government, but there's a big section in the paper talking about, well, here's what the title is. Israel is waiting for the winter of fire. These are direct threats against, but you probably guessed that, right? Direct threat against Israel. And then there's a big article in here, and the title of this, and you see the drone there, and you see all the different kinds of drones that they have access to. And essentially the article says, listen, we have stuff that even Iran doesn't have. And we're going to use it when we decide to use it, and Israel better be ready. And so this is the English translation of the headline. A great jihadi leader, that's Nasrallah of Hezbollah, tells about the resistance that's Hezbollah, preparations for war. Our goal is to destroy the enemy's army, and they will retrieve the bodies from under the rubble of cities. In other words, they're going to destroy cities in Israel. That's their goal. And here was Iran had a big drone exercise this week. Now, I don't know that these are all operational, but Russia's buying drones from them to use in Ukraine. And this is the thing that's interesting about modern warfare, is that it's very asymmetrical, that a country like Iran, even under sanctions and a bad economy and collapsing demographics, can build these drones that are pretty powerful. Now, remember they shot down one of ours a few years ago. They reverse engineered that thing, and they have drones like that now. That drone, by the way, can't remember the designation of it. It could stay aloft for like 35 hours. It had an incredible range. It had firepower. It was unmanned. It cost $230 million, that one plane. And Iran shot it down, got the debris, and reversed engineered it. And they're incorporating that in their drone technology. Now, by the way, Turkey has maybe even better drone technology. So what you've seen over the past few months, now this is an article that was in Israel newspapers about when Kohavi was talking about the response to the Gaza rockets a couple weeks ago, said, well, we attacked a third country, and that third country was Yemen. Now, it's kind of interesting because Yemen, drones and missiles and that type of thing from Yemen attacked the United Arab Emirates. And if you do the coordinates on a map, you'll see that Israel's about the same distance from Yemen as the United Arab Emirates is. So it was practice, and they're tied into Lebanon. So, and then there's also reports that Israeli and American jets have breached Iranian airspace over the past month a number of times, F-35 stealth fighters, and have not been detected. Kind of interesting. At the same time, you had this was the picture in Tehran a few weeks ago, and the one thing that's coming out of that is there was a big agreement signed between Putin and Raisi. It's been negotiated. It was probably signed before Putin went to Tehran. That's the way they do these things diplomatically. And this is from oilprice.com. Iran and Russia have now moved under this agreement, this $40 billion agreement. Do you see what they're doing? To create a global natural gas cartel. Well, that's kind of interesting. Look at what this article says. Russia and Iran are building the foundation for a potential natural gas cartel. The Russian-Iran alliance aims to control as much as of the two key elements in the global supply matrix as possible. And by the way, if you translate this article from Al Akbar that I referred to earlier, you will find that this article, where's that article? This article, that article talks about this oilprice.com article that talks about the new gas cartel between Russia and Iran. And this is an early article. Russia's new gas deals with Iran are a threat to the West. And so there's all this gas and oil. So the red is gas, the black is oil. This is an older map. It doesn't have the stuff in the Eastern Mediterranean, but it's mostly focused on the Persian Gulf and Caspian Sea regions. And the big red thing there in the middle of the Persian Gulf with some black in the middle, that's the Pars fields that are jointly owned by Iran and Qatar. But the belief among the oil and gas people is that this agreement between Russia and Iran will be used for Russia to get around international sanctions by shipping its oil through Iran. And Iran's going to come on the market. At the same time, there's also this guy sort of involved. And the Iranian nuclear deal, the title of this article is, The Iranian Nuclear Deal Shuffles the Cards, Moscow-Riyadh, the oil alliance will remain. So there's this relationship between Moscow and Saudi Arabia. And all this stuff, I'd have to sit down and unpack it because there's just like a mountain of stuff coming at us. But under the Iranian nuclear deal, by 2030, most people estimate that Iran will get $1 trillion. Now, look at what they've done with the $150 billion that Obama gave them back in 2015. What do you think they're going to do with $1 trillion? They're going to cause havoc all over the world, particularly against the little Satan and the great Satan. And so the question is something going to happen? Now, there's been some conflict between Iranian proxies and the U.S. forces that are in northeastern Syria, up around Dar el-Zor, in the oil and wheat producing areas of Syria that's effectively controlled by the U.S. and the Kurds. It's all a mess. There's been rocket attacks on U.S. bases up there. There was also this report. You won't believe how much stuff I'm cutting out of here. Well, here's a good example. Lebanon's a big deal in this. And so you see the silos there. Well, what happened, those silos, which were damaged 2 years ago, there's been a fire raging in there for the last few months. Part of it collapsed, and then looks like about 2/3 of it has now collapsed. And this is where all the grain for Lebanon was stored. So they don't have a place. They haven't replaced it. So they're on the brink of really bad situations. Then there's also the satellite reports. What do they show? They show that Russia, on the left, would be the S-300 battery in the middle of Syria, in April, and here it is today. And this is an S-300 battery. So you can see it from the satellite, and it's gone. And they've also removed some of the S-300 batteries from Tartus, the big port. And the reason for it is they need them in Ukraine. So there's all this logistics thing, and everybody says, well, Russia's coming in, it's going to happen. Look, Russia's withdrawing in part from Syria. So I don't know that Ezekiel 38:39 is imminent. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I'm just saying there's a logistical aspect. You don't withdraw your forces from Syria. But it's kind of interesting, assuming that Russia is part of this, and you can make the case for it. And I kind of lean that way myself. Turkey certainly is involved, and there's Turkey-Russian alliance. But what does it say about Russia? Does it say, well, Russia comes again, launches from Syria? It doesn't really say that. It says, I will put a hook in your jaw, or hooks in your jaw, and turn you around and bring you back. It's kind of interesting that they're withdrawing. Now, I think this is later in the 70th week period, but certainly you can see the beginnings of all of these different alliances. And I'll show you one more thing. And again, this will get me in trouble with some of my friends, but we talk a lot about the line, the city that they're going to build in northwestern Saudi Arabia. Here's an artist's conception of it, 1,500 feet tall, 100 miles long, 200 yards wide. It looks like a giant prison, right? And all these people talk about, it's going to be so wonderful to be in here. They'll have golf courses and all this other stuff. And I'm trying, I wonder if anybody can hit it over it's sort of like over here at Topgolf, they try to hit it over the fence. It's a beautiful area. But look at the architectural renderings. And some people have said, that sort of looks like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And you should know that this is in the area of Sheba and Dedan. There's Sheba, Dedan. It also talks about the fact in Jeremiah 49, the earth is moved at the noise of their fall, at the cry of the noise thereof was heard in the Red Sea. Where's the Red Sea? That's the Red Sea, that body of water there by the line, just south of the line. Neom. And so here's a rendition of this. But it's interesting, in the Financial Times, I mentioned this in my midweek update. The architectural critic. Now, look, everybody argues about, is Babylon America? Is it Rome? Is it rebuilt in Iraq? You know, I have a lot of friends who believe that. But there's a logistics thing. So they're starting to build Neom. Some people think Neom is a candidate for Babylon, and I'm not going to dismiss that out of hand. And it's just kind of interesting that the architectural critic for the Financial Times, I'm closing with this, said this in reviewing. He says it's a dystopian city portrayed as utopia, and I agree with him. It's kind of creepy, but everybody's really excited about this. It's advertised everywhere. This is what he said. The inside is, of course, rendered as a bucolic techno-utopia, a valley of trees and foliage. Looking at my wife. The new Babylon. That's kind of interesting language, I think, that this guy just kind of pulled out of the air. And by the way, sort of a secondary capital of the Babylonian Empire was in this region of Saudi Arabia. And some think, I kind of tend to think it, that just north of the line is a mountain called Jabal al-Laz, which is the true Mount Sinai. Now, there's a lot of disagreement on that. I'm not going to make an issue of it, but maybe that's, it's just part of this convergence of all the stuff that we see. So listen, pay attention. There's a lot of things going on. Very interesting times. But we need to be in prayer for friends we have in the UK and Europe, because it could be pretty rough over there this winter. It could be rough here. It could be rough everywhere in the world. But this is, I think, part of the world that the Lord prophesied that it would be before he came. And so, listen, that should be good news. Everything's falling apart. Praise the Lord. I know, it's kind of a different perspective, but, you know, listen, look up. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for your word. We pray that you'll bless our weeks. I pray you'll help us always keep in mind our duty as Christians to share the gospel and stand firm in the faith. I pray you'll give us the power of the Holy Spirit to do that in what are clearly very evil times. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.